The first TikTok lasted just 15 seconds, but it burned a name into millions of screens and dragged that name into court. The clip opened with bouncy background music, the kind meant for harmless dance trends. A caption flashed across the screen in bold red letters. "She ruined everything. Watch till the end." It was playful on the surface, poisonous underneath. The camera panned across a dim apartment. A man's voice, mocking, theatrical, narrated. "Ever wonder how betrayal looks? Let me show you." He never mentioned her name. He didn't need to. A cropped yearbook photo, a blurred outline of her classroom, a distinct bracelet on a wrist. Those were enough. At that exact moment, Amelia Carter was sitting alone in her living room. The only light came from the glow of her phone. Her thumb hesitated above the screen, replaying the clip again and again, hoping she had misheard, misseen. But each replay drove the knife deeper. Her phone vibrated so violently it nearly slid off the coffee table. Message after message poured in. 327 notifications in one night. Former colleagues, acquaintances she hadn't spoken to in years, even parents from her school. The pings were relentless. Amelia whispered to herself, voice cracking. He thought it was just content. For me, it's a public execution. By sunrise, the TikTok had crossed 200,000 views. Shares multiplied like sparks in dry grass. A screenshot landed inside a private Facebook group of parents at Westbrook Elementary, the school where Amelia had taught for 7 years. Someone had circled the blurred photo of her wrist with a neon arrow. "Isn't this Ms. Carter?" The comments below unfolded in real time. Sp. "Wow, I trusted her with my kids." D. "I knew something was off. If this is true, she should never be near a classroom again." The verdict of the internet was faster than any courts. And much harsher. But pause here. Step back. This was just a 15-second video, tossed onto an app known for lip syncs and pranks. Why would it matter so much? Why would it spiral into a national reckoning? Because in today's world, virality is its own courtroom. One post can erase reputations, end careers, and redraw relationships. The gavel doesn't strike in wood-paneled chambers anymore. It strikes with every tap of a like button, every swipe of a finger, every reshare that spreads a lie wider. This wasn't simply a breakup gone sour. It was weaponized visibility. It was defamation, dressed up as entertainment. Amelia closed her laptop that morning, unable to face the cascade of gossip. She thought about ignoring it, letting the storm pass. But then the real blow landed. In her classroom, a child raised his hand with innocent curiosity. "Ms. Carter, is it true what they said about you online?" The words pierced deeper than any insult from adults. If even her students, her sanctuary, were now tainted by that 15-second clip, silence was no longer an option. The room felt smaller, walls pressing in. On the blackboard behind her, she had written the day's lesson theme in thick white chalk. T.R. used. The letters glowed under the fluorescent light. A giggle from the back corner distracted her. She turned to see a student half erase the word with a sleeve. Now it read only HTRU. The symbolism was brutal. Trust cut short. Amelia swallowed hard, smiled faintly to hide the tremor, and continued the lesson. But inside, something shifted. This was not the digital prank Dylan Brooks thought it was. This was not just content. It was a carefully sharpened blade, disguised as a joke, aimed straight at her life. And the internet, hungry for drama, had cheered as it struck. The clip ended with Dylan's smirk and one last caption. "If you know, you know." Everyone knew. In that opening 15 seconds, the stage was set. Letters, but conflict was lit. A woman's reputation was on trial, not yet in a courtroom, but in the unforgiving arena of social media. And as Amelia sat in her dark living room, the glow of her phone still burning into her eyes, she realized something chilling. The punishment had already begun. The law had not yet spoken, but the crowd had. This wasn't just a story of heartbreak. It was a story of how a single clip, with music too cheerful and words too cruel, could bend truth into spectacle. And it was only the beginning. Amelia Carter was 32 years old, the kind of teacher children remembered years after leaving her classroom. At Westbrook Elementary, she wasn't just Ms. Carter. She was the teacher who drew planets on the chalkboard with colored dust, who stayed late helping shy kids find their voice, who brought cupcakes on birthdays because she refused to let anyone feel forgotten. Who's adored her, witches trusted her. Ah, principals praised her. But trust, as Amelia was beginning to learn, was fragile. The one rumor could crack it, one video could shatter it. Behind the warm smile she wore at school, Amelia carried invisible burdens. The long nights of lesson planning blurred with insomnia. She often sat up in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, her mind looping through worst-case scenarios. A bad grade here, a misinterpreted word there. She feared the domino effect of misunderstanding. For someone whose life revolved around reputation, the thought of losing face haunted her like a shadow. Now, with Dylan's TikToks spreading like wildfire, that shadow had a name. Lim was 34. On paper, he was just a mid-level media consultant, a man who understood branding, hashtags, and the rhythms of the online world. In reality, he lived for attention. He knew how to manufacture it, how to make a trivial slight into a trending storm. When Amelia ended their 2-year relationship, Dylan could have walked away. But to him, being ignored was intolerable. "People like me don't get dumped," he told a friend over drinks. "We do the dumping." Traction wounded his pride. And for someone fluent in the language of virality, there was only one way to reclaim his power. Spin the story, control the narrative, weaponize the audience. He sat before his ring light one evening, slicking his hair back, phone propped on a tripod. His expression slid easily into a smirk. "I'm not naming names," Dylan said into the camera, pausing for effect. His followers leaned closer, screens glowing in dark bedrooms. "Horpolity of 10, together and odds." The comments section lit up instantly. "Spill it, Dylan." She. "Oh my God, is this about your ex?" Say her name. He didn't have to. Amelia's face, half hidden in a blurred yearbook scan, did the work for him. When Amelia stumbled across the video, her breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "He didn't need to name me." My face was already there. Her hands trembled so violently she nearly dropped the phone. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was surgical. Dylan knew exactly how to imply, how to gesture, how to let the mob do the heavy lifting. He didn't accuse her outright. He crafted an insinuation so sharp it cut deeper than a direct attack. A week later, Amelia was back in her classroom, clinging to routine as a lifeline. She tried to focus on multiplication tables and handwriting drills, but she noticed a new behavior: students holding their phones just below desk level, cameras angled toward her. At first, she dismissed it. Kids were restless, easily distracted. But then, during a history lesson, one boy deliberately raised his phone, lens glinting in the fluorescent light. He was filming her, not the board. She froze for a moment. The chalk squeaked mid-word. That was the breakthrough. The moment she realized the battlefield had crossed the threshold. The invasion wasn't just online anymore. It was here, inside her classroom, in the eyes of her students. She forced a smile, continued the lesson, but her heart hammered. In the reflection of the glass window, she saw herself framed not as a teacher, but as content. Meanwhile, Dylan's reach stretched beyond TikTok. He appeared as a guest on a podcast dedicated to truth-telling in relationships. The host leaned in with mock seriousness. "So Dylan, people are saying you're exaggerating. If your ex is innocent, why hasn't she defended herself?" Dylan laughed into the microphone. "If you're not guilty," he said smoothly, "why so silent?" The line traveled like wildfire. Clips of the podcast circulated on Twitter, chopped into bite-sized quotes. Commentators repeated it as though it were wisdom. To Dylan's fans, Amelia's silence became proof of guilt. He had twisted logic into spectacle, and the crowd applauded. Amelia lived in two parallel realities. By day, she tried to preserve normalcy, reading picture books, grading assignments, greeting parents at drop-off. By night, she drowned in an ocean of digital venom. Anonymous messages landed in her inbox. Gee, we know what you did. S. Key, before we make you quit. The cruelest part was the ambiguity. Dylan never made a concrete claim. He dealt in suggestion, insinuation, smoke without fire. And yet, smoke was enough. In the court of public opinion, suspicion was a sentence. The contrast between Amelia and Dylan was stark. She built trust quietly, over years of patient teaching. He destroyed reputations quickly, in seconds of edited video. She feared misunderstanding. He thrived on it. Their collision was inevitable. One stood for stability, the other for chaos. One guarded children, the other courted clicks. But what made the conflict explosive was not just their personal history. It was the way their private fracture bled into the public square. This wasn't a breakup anymore. It was a referendum on truth itself. Could one person's thirst for virality override another person's right to dignity? In another era, Dylan's bitterness might have ended with whispered rumors, maybe a nasty letter. But in the digital age, his tools were sharper and his reach exponential. A blurred photo, a suggestive caption, a podcast soundbite. These were not harmless fragments. They were weapons, calibrated to trigger clicks, outrage, speculation. And Amelia, who had always lived within the boundaries of classrooms and chalkboards, suddenly found herself exposed to an audience of millions. The law was built for tangible harm. Contracts broken, property stolen, fists thrown. But what about reputations stolen by a viral clip? What about lies hidden inside jokes and content? That question. The clash between the virtual power Dylan wielded and the real-world justice Amelia sought was about to define not just their story, but a larger one. The future of accountability in a digital world. As the second week of TikTok chaos unfolded, Amelia stood once again before her class. She tried to steady her breathing as 30 pairs of young eyes followed her. On the board, she wrote the word of the day in careful chalk. Integrity. She underlined it once. Her hand shook. Behind her, a phone camera clicked quietly. Somewhere else, Dylan refreshed his feed, watching the numbers climb. 2 lives, 2 worlds, hurtling toward collision. And neither of them knew yet just how far the fallout would spread. The video didn't stay confined to TikTok. It spilled everywhere. Twitter threads dissected each frame, Instagram memes parodied the captions, and Facebook groups debated whether Amelia Carter was the woman in question. In the teacher's lounge at Westbrook Elementary, whispers slithered through the air like smoke. A colleague scrolled through her phone, eyes darting up at Amelia before lowering her voice. Poor thing. Imagine being exposed like that. Another muttered. If even half of it's true. The sentence dangled, unfinished, heavy. By the 3rd day, Amelia could feel suspicion trailing behind her like an invisible cloak. Hallways that once echoed with cheerful greetings now fell into uncomfortable silence when she walked by. On Friday morning, Amelia stood at the front gate, as she always did, greeting parents during drop-off. It was usually her favorite part of the day. The quick smiles, the warm chatter, the little waves from kids clinging to backpacks twice their size. But today was different. A mother paused before her, eyes narrowed. "Good morning, Miss Carter," she said, the tone polite but clipped, like a blade wrapped in silk. Another father gave a nod, too curt, and ushered his daughter inside without their usual small talk. Amelia forced a smile, cheeks aching. She felt as if every glance was a verdict, every silence a judgment. When the gate closed, her hand lingered on the metal latch longer than usual. The routine had shifted into ritual, and rituals carried weight. At first, Amelia told herself to endure it. Social media storms came and went like weather. Ignore it, she thought. It will blow over. She avoided the comment sections, muted group chats, deleted notifications. When friends called, she let it ring. Silence was her shield, fragile though it was. But silence has its own sound. The hum of isolation, the throb of rumors growing unchecked. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. Amelia was leading a discussion about explorers and maps when a small hand shot up in the third row. Jacob, a bright-eyed 10-year-old, grinned as if he'd just solved a riddle. "Miss Carter," he asked innocently, "is it true you cheated?" The room froze. The words cut through the air with the bluntness only a child's honesty could carry. Pencils stilled. 30 heads turned in unison, eyes wide, waiting for the answer. Amelia's throat tightened. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk until her knuckles whitened. For a split second, she wanted to vanish, to melt into the chalkboard behind her. But she forced herself to breathe. "Let's focus on today's lesson, Jacob," she said softly. But inside, she was collapsing. That one question sliced deeper than all the online cruelty combined. Because now the rumor had stepped into her sanctuary. Her classroom, the one place she had always been safe, had been breached. She turned back to the board, trying to steady herself. Earlier that morning, she had written the day's theme in large chalk letters. T-R-U. T. Rust. Her lesson was meant to explain how explorers had to trust their maps, how communities trusted leaders, how trust built civilizations. But as she picked up the chalk again, a faint giggle rose from the back row. She spun just in time to see a student's sleeve swipe across the board. Half the word disappeared, leaving only T-R-U. Ju-tu-R-U. Her breath hitched. The fragment glared back at her, a jagged wound on the blackboard. Truced, fractured. True, incomplete. The symbolism was unbearable. When the bell rang, the children spilled out, oblivious to the damage they'd left behind. Amelia stayed behind, staring at the chalkboard. Her hand trembled as she traced the missing letters. For years she had built her life around that word. Trust from her students. Trust from parents. Trust in herself. And now, in one careless swipe, even the board mocked her. She whispered under her breath, a mantra meant to anchor her. "It's not true. I did nothing wrong. B." But her voice sounded small, almost drowned by the silence of the empty room. What Amelia didn't yet realize was that the classroom moment wasn't just private pain. It was already public record. Someone had secretly filmed Jacob's question and her silence afterward. Within hours, the clip appeared online, spliced with Dylan's earlier TikToks. The new edit painted her hesitation as proof. Commentators filled in the blanks. If she didn't do it, why didn't she deny it right away? A T. The public trial had begun in earnest, and Amelia was the defendant, without a lawyer, without a chance to prepare. This was the trigger. What began as a personal breakup had escalated into something far larger. A reputational war staged in the arena of social media. Platforms designed for dance challenges and pet videos had turned into a courtroom, and the jury was millions of anonymous strangers. The distortion was clear. Silence equaled guilt. Hesitation equaled confession. Blurred images equaled evidence. Power lay not in facts, but in perception. When understood that, Amelia was just beginning to grasp it. That night, Amelia sat at her kitchen table, head buried in her hands. The phone buzzed endlessly, demanding attention she refused to give. She had tried silence. She had tried patience, but the storm only grew. Her reflection stared back at her from the darkened window. Tired eyes, clenched jaw, a woman on the brink. For the first time, she admitted the truth to herself. This won't pass. This won't fade. It will only stop if I fight. The trigger had been pulled. The bullet was in flight, and the courtroom, real and digital, awaited her step forward. The question from Jacob lingered like a bruise on Amelia's heart. For days she replayed it in her mind. "Miss Carter, is it true you cheated?" The innocence in his voice cut deeper than the cruelty online. She tried to push through, bury herself in routines, lesson plans, grading papers, keeping her smile intact for her students. But every hallway whisper, every averted glance, reminded her that silence was not protection. It was surrender. On a Saturday evening, Amelia sat before her bedroom mirror. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of her refrigerator. She stared at her reflection. pale skin under tired eyes, lips pressed into a thin line. Her hands trembled as she opened her leather-bound journal, the one she had kept since college. The first page was filled with old dreams: teaching, traveling, building a family. But tonight, the page before her remained blank. Her pen hovered, shaking. Finally, she pressed it down and wrote in capital letters, "Not victim. Plaintiff." The ink bled into the paper. She underlined it twice, her hand steadier with each stroke. That single word, plaintiff, shifted something in her chest. She was no longer just someone absorbing blows. She would strike back, not with rumors or revenge, but with the one weapon Dylan never anticipated: the law. On Monday morning, Amelia walked into the downtown law office of Rachel Nguyen. The waiting room smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Behind the glass door, Rachel's name gleamed in silver letters: Tumyun and Associates. Defamation and cyber law. Rachel was in her late 30s, sharp-eyed, with the calm demeanor of someone who had wrestled with chaos before. She greeted Amelia warmly, yet directly. "Miss Carter," she said, motioning toward a chair. "I've seen your case everywhere. Tell me everything." Amelia hesitated. Her fingers twisted the strap of her bag. "Maybe I should just let it go," she murmured. "It's only getting worse the more people talk about it." Rachel leaned forward, voice low but firm. "Silence doesn't keep you safe. Proof does." The words hit Amelia like a gavel strike. Rachel pulled a thick binder from the shelf and dropped it onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud, startling Amelia. "This," Rachel said, tapping the binder, "is every precedent of cyberbullying, defamation, and reputation damage cases in the last 5 years. People like Dylan think the internet is lawless, but it's not. He weaponized a platform. We'll weaponize the law." Amelia blinked at the phrase, letting it sink in. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt a flicker of hope. Rachel continued, "He blurred your photo, but it's still identifiable. He implied without naming you, but implication is enough. And his podcast? That's his ego doing half our work." Amelia almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because Rachel's certainty cracked through her despair like sunlight through a storm. The two women sat in silence for a moment. Amelia exhaled, long and shaky. "Do you think we can win?" she asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. "We don't walk into court unless we do." Amelia nodded slowly. The knot in her stomach loosened. For weeks, she had been shrinking under the weight of Dylan's narrative. Now, with Rachel across from her, she felt herself expand again. "This won't be easy," Rachel warned. "He'll fight back. He'll spin it as free speech, as a joke, as your overreaction. But the truth is on our side." Amelia thought of Jacob's question, of the parents' suspicious stares, of the chalkboard scarred with "TRU." Those wounds demanded more than silence. She straightened her back. "Then let's fight." That night, Amelia returned home and opened her journal again. Beneath her earlier words, she wrote a new line: "Allows from silence to proof, from victim to plaintiff." Her hand didn't tremble this time. She looked into the mirror again, but now her reflection felt different. Not a woman hunted by gossip, but a woman choosing to fight. The shift was subtle yet seismic. In that decision, Amelia had crossed a threshold. This was the turning point. Up until now, Amelia had been trapped in the digital storm, buffeted by whispers, paralyzed by fear. But courage often begins quietly, with ink on a page, with a whispered affirmation, with a single conversation that reframes everything. What Dylan underestimated was resilience. He thought she would fold under pressure, vanish from public life, confirm his narrative by disappearing. Instead, she had chosen the opposite. To step forward, to use the very system he mocked, to transform private pain into a public case. This was more than personal. It was symbolic. A lone teacher against the machinery of virality. A reminder that platforms may distort justice, but courts could still reclaim it. Amelia returned to school the next morning with a different aura. Her steps were steadier, her shoulders straighter. The rumors hadn't vanished. Parents still eyed her cautiously, students still whispered, But inside, she carried a new anchor. Not victim. Plaintiff. When she wrote the word of the day on the blackboard, she chose something deliberate. C-O-U. Carriage. The chalk dust lingered in the air, soft but unshakable. And though the storm outside raged on, Amelia finally knew she wasn't standing in it alone. The storm spread faster than Amelia or Rachel could have imagined. What began as whispers in school hallways now roared across national feeds. News outlets splashed headlines in bold fonts. Teacher accused in viral TikTok scandal. Defamation lawsuit. Brewing in social media showdown. Every hour, new think pieces appeared, some sympathetic, others cruelly speculative. On morning talk shows, panels of experts debated her case as though it were a reality TV storyline. The hashtags told the story. On Twitter, Amelia Exposed began trending first. Armchair detectives compiled screenshots, slow-motion analyses of Dylan's clips, conspiracy threads claiming proof. The cruelty was casual, wrapped in the thrill of sleuthing. Then, almost as if summoned by justice itself, a counter hashtag rose. Peace and justice for Amelia. It started with a single post. A video from one of her former students, now a college freshman. He sat in his dorm room, speaking straight into his laptop camera. Ms. Carter was the reason I ever believed I could write. She stayed after school to help me when no one else cared. The person Dylan describes? That's not her. That's not the teacher who changed my life. The clip was raw, shaky, but powerful. It gathered thousands of shares within hours. Soon, other voices joined in, parents praising her dedication, colleagues recalling her integrity, students holding up old assignments with encouraging notes she'd written in the margins. The internet became a battlefield. Hashtags clashed like banners on opposing sides of a war. Dylan, unwilling to lose control of the narrative, doubled down. He released another TikTok, filmed with the same smug smirk. Truth doesn't need court approval, he declared, eyes glittering under ring light. She can sue me. She can cry all she wants, but facts are facts. The video ended with his laughter. Cold, performative, echoing over dramatic music, his followers erupted with praise. Preach. Preach. Free speech, baby. Don't let them silence you. But for every cheer, there was now a counter shout. Freedom of speech isn't freedom to destroy lives. This is harassment, not truth. 2 Topper C. Rachel's strategy. Inside her office, Rachel Nguyen scrolled through the chaos, her face composed but eyes sharp. Good, she muttered, tapping the screen. He's building our case for us. Amelia sat across from her, tense. Is winning people over? Look at the comments. Rachel cut her off. Comments aren't law. Evidence is. He can scream truth all he wants, but in court, he'll need proof. And he doesn't have it. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were screenshots, transcripts, digital forensics reports. Each piece was a brick in the wall they were building against Dylan. Let him keep talking, Rachel said. Every word digs him deeper. Outside the courtroom, however, the battle was far less orderly. On college campuses, students held debates titled TikTok versus Sash. Truth. Some argued Dylan's posts were satire, protected speech. Others called them reckless lies with real-world consequences. Talk radio callers shouted over each other, who she's playing the victim. No. She's standing up for all of us. Even in Amelia's neighborhood, the division was palpable. A bakery down the street taped a handwritten sign to the window. W.E. Stand with MS. Carter. 2 blocks away, a diner owner shook his head when asked, muttering, "Where there's smoke, there's fire." Amelia could feel the country splitting around her name. One afternoon, outside the courthouse steps, a throng of reporters pressed microphones forward as Rachel guided Amelia past them. "Ms. Carter, why sue now?" One shouted. "Are you worried about silencing free speech?" Another pressed. Before Amelia could answer, a seasoned journalist with salt and pepper hair raised his voice above the din. "This trial won't just decide one teacher's fate," he said, half to her, half to the cameras. It'll decide TikTok's limits. The words landed heavy, foreshadowing the scale of what lay ahead. This wasn't just Amelia versus Dylan anymore. It was a test case for the entire digital age. At night, Amelia sat alone at her kitchen table, scrolling through the battlefield of hashtags. For every message of support, there were 10 knives of cruelty. Attention seeker. Liar in disguise. She's just acting. Her chest tightened, eyes blurring with tears. Then she forced herself to look at the supportive clips. Her old students' testimony, parents' thank yous, the bakery sign. She let them anchor her against the tide. Still, the toll was visible. Sleep evaded her. Coffee no longer masked the fatigue in her eyes. She felt like a soldier drafted into a war she never wanted. Dylan, meanwhile, relished the chaos. He hired a slick attorney known for defending controversial influencers. Together, they mapped out a strategy. Lean on free speech, frame Amelia as overreacting, paint himself as a martyr for truth. In a private call leaked to the press, Dylan sneered. She wants to scare me with court papers? Fine. I'll scare her with followers. Let's see who wins, the law or the crowd. The quote spread instantly. Critics condemned his arrogance. Supporters hailed his defiance. But either way, Dylan had cemented his persona, the anti-hero fighting censorship. The conflict had escalated beyond two individuals. It had become a societal tug-of-war. On one side, advocates for accountability, insisting that online speech carried consequences. On the other, defenders of unfiltered expression, claiming any restriction was tyranny. What was at stake was no longer just Amelia's reputation. It was the very question of how justice could survive in a world where virality distorted truth and blurred the line between opinion and defamation. One evening, Amelia received a letter in her school mailbox. It was written in neat, looping cursive by a parent she barely knew. I don't know what's true. But I do know this. My daughter comes home every day excited about what she learns from you. That's the Amelia Carter I see. Don't let the noise steal that from us. Amelia clutched the letter to her chest, her eyes wet. It reminded her why she had chosen this path. Not just for herself, but for every quiet voice drowned out by digital mobs. By the time the pre-trial hearing was announced, the public frenzy had reached fever pitch. News vans lined the courthouse steps, protesters held signs on both sides, and the internet buzzed with predictions. For Amelia, it was terrifying. For Dylan, exhilarating. For Rachel, inevitable. As they prepared to enter the courtroom for the first time, Rachel turned to Amelia. Her voice was steady, grounding. "Remember this," she said. "He thrives on spectacle. We thrive on truth." Amelia nodded. She carried the letter from the parent in her purse, folded neatly, like armor. The rising conflict had reached its peak, and the real battle, the one inside the courtroom, was about to begin. The courthouse buzzed like a hive. By dawn, news vans already lined the curb, reporters polishing their sound bites, protesters waving signs on both sides of the marble steps. Some read Estes for Amelia, others screamed. Amelia exposed in angry block letters. Inside, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Every bench filled, cameras flashing before bailiffs barked, "No photos!" Still, the frenzy felt impossible to contain. When Amelia Carter walked in, head high but trembling slightly, a wave of murmurs rippled across the room. Her lawyer, Rachel Nguyen, walked beside her, steady as stone. Across the aisle, Dylan Brooks leaned back in his chair, smirking. He wore a tailored suit that gleamed under the overhead lights, as if this were a premiere and he the star. The judge entered. The gavel cracked down. This court is now in session. Rachel wasted no time. She projected Dylan's TikTok clips onto a large screen. The familiar ring-light glow filled the courtroom, casting an eerie reflection on the polished wood. The first video played, 15 seconds of jaunty music, the caption, "She ruined everything. Watch till the end." Gasps broke out when Amelia's blurred yearbook photo flickered on screen. Rachel's voice was sharp. Your Honor, Exhibit A. This clip has been viewed 4 million times. Each frame carefully designed to suggest one person, my client. She clicked again. Charts appeared. View count spiking over days, comments tagging Amelia's name, even threads in the parents' Facebook group. Rachel, this is not free speech. This is targeted defamation disguised as entertainment. Dylan's attorney objected. My client never said her name. Not once. You can't sue someone for innuendo. The judge raised an eyebrow. We'll let the jury decide what was implied. On cross-examination, Dylan smirked at the jury. I never said Amelia's name, he repeated, lounging in the witness chair. People assumed things. That's not my fault. I can't control the internet. Rachel stepped forward, voice steady. You didn't need to name her. The internet did it for you. Her words landed like a hammer. The jury stirred. Dylan shrugged, lips curling into that familiar smirk. Not my problem if people connect the dots. Rachel clicked again. A still frame froze on the screen. Dylan's third video, the one filmed in his apartment window. Please direct your attention here, she said. With a laser pointer, she circled a faint reflection in the glass door behind him. The jury leaned forward. The reflection was unmistakable. Amelia's face, caught in a photo Dylan had pinned to his wall. She never consented to be shown, Rachel explained. But he left her reflection visible. It's subtle, but it's there. And millions of viewers caught it. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Amelia's stomach churned as she saw the proof displayed so coldly, but also a flicker of relief. She wasn't imagining things. Evidence was real. When Amelia took the stand, silence fell. She clasped her hands to steady them. Rachel asked softly, Ms. Carter, what has been the impact of these videos on your life? Amelia's voice wavered but grew stronger as she spoke. He turned a breakup into a public trial. My students stopped seeing me as a teacher. They saw me as a scandal. Parents stopped seeing me as trustworthy. I couldn't walk down the street without whispers following me. Her eyes locked on the jury. I lost sleep. I lost friends, but what I refused to lose was my dignity. Then she delivered the line she had rehearsed, the one born from nights staring into mirrors. He thought silence would protect me. It didn't. Proof did. The words cut through the air, ringing like a bell. Even the judge paused before nodding solemnly. When Dylan returned to the stand under cross-examination, his cocky armor began to crack. Rachel's questions were precise, relentless. Mr. Brooks, why blur a photo if not to hint at someone's identity? Objection, his lawyer snapped. Speculation? The judge allowed it. Dylan shifted, still smirking. It was a joke. People read into it. Rachel pressed on. And this podcast quote, if you're not guilty, why so silent? I.S. Did you intend people to believe Ms. Z? Carter was guilty. Dylan laughed, too loudly. And Henri. Everybody knew it was her. That was the point. The room froze. Gasps erupted from the gallery. The judge slammed the gavel for order. Yulik. But the damage was done. Dylan's own words, arrogant, careless, had pierced the defense. Rachel didn't gloat. She simply turned to the jury and repeated, that was the point. In closing arguments, Rachel kept it simple. She replayed Amelia's testimony, the reflection frame, Dylan's slip. Then she gestured toward Amelia, who rose slowly, facing the jury herself. Her voice was calm, steady, unshakable. He thought a joke could bury me. But truth doesn't rot. The line landed like a stone in still water, rippling outward. Proud oars scribbled notes. The gallery fell silent. In that instant, the imbalance of power shifted. Dylan had relied on spectacle. The crowd, the smirk, the insinuation. But spectacle collapses under scrutiny. A single boastful sentence. Everybody knew it was her. That was the point. Carried more weight than hours of video. It revealed intent, malice, arrogance. Sometimes, justice hinges not on mountains of documents, but on one unguarded word. Dylan had supplied it himself. As the gavel struck to adjourn for deliberation, the gallery erupted once more. Supporters cheered softly, detractors grumbled. Cameras flashed the instant the judge left the bench. Rachel touched Amelia's shoulder gently. "Oh, you did it," she whispered. But Amelia shook her head. "Not yet. Not until the verdict." Still, for the first time in months, her shoulders felt lighter. She had spoken, she had been heard, and the truth now lived in the record. Permanent, undeniable. And for Dylan, his smirk had finally cracked. The jury filed back into the courtroom after only 6 hours of deliberation. The tension in the room was suffocating. Every eye fixed on the foreperson, who clutched the verdict slip with both hands. Amelia sat rigid, her palms pressed together under the table, lips whispering a silent prayer. Dylan lounged as though he already knew the outcome, his smirk rehearsed. The judge's voice cut through the air. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Dylan Brooks, liable for defamation." A gasp erupted across the gallery. The judge continued. "Damages are awarded in the amount of 3 million. The gavel struck once, twice, final, thunderous. And then, almost comically, the sound of dozens of phones buzzed and pinged at once. Reporters' screens lit up in unison. Breaking news. Dylan Brooks found guilty of defamation. The digital notification tone echoed through the courtroom like a metallic choir. A symbol of the world Amelia had been dragged into, one where news traveled faster than truth, now became the instrument announcing her vindication. When the judge dismissed the room, chaos exploded. Reporters sprinted toward the doors, cameramen shoved to get angles, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Outside, the courthouse steps blazed with flashbulbs. Amelia stepped into the storm with Rachel at her side, both women momentarily blinded by the strobe of cameras. Voices overlapped. "Amelia, how do you feel? Do you see this as a win for teachers? For women? Will you push for TikTok regulations?" Amelia raised a hand, her face calm. "Today is about truth," she said simply, "and truth deserves light." The crowd roared. Inside, Dylan sat alone at the defense table. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Dylan didn't respond. The smirk that had carried him through weeks of spectacle was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed emptiness. When he finally rose, the courtroom was nearly empty. He walked out the back door, shoulders hunched, tie loosened. Outside, protesters who had once defended him now jeered. A young woman held up a neon sign. "Freedom of speech. Freedom to defame." Dylan kept his eyes down, brushing past the crowd in silence. For the first time, he had no audience willing to clap. For Amelia, the verdict meant more than money. It was the restoration of her name. Parents who once eyed her suspiciously now stopped her in grocery store aisles to apologize. Students ran to her shouting, "We knew you were innocent." That night, she returned to her classroom alone. On the blackboard, she wrote in broad strokes, "Just." This time, no one erased it. She let the chalk dust settle, luminous under the pale classroom lights. But the case didn't just end with her. News outlets called the verdict a landmark, the first major case in which TikTok content had been directly deemed defamatory in court. Legal analysts debated its ripple effects on podcasts, live streams, and social media storytelling. Commentators on morning shows put it bluntly, this isn't just about one teacher. This is about drawing the line between free speech and reckless defamation. Parents began holding workshops on digital literacy. Schools added units on online responsibility. Even influencers tweeted caution. Check your facts before you post. You don't want to end up like Dylan. 2 weeks later, an email landed in Amelia's inbox. It was from a principal at a neighboring school. "Dear Ms. Carter, your courage has inspired educators everywhere. We would be honored if you would speak to our students about digital responsibility, about how words online carry weight, and how truth matters. Please consider this an open invitation." Amelia read the message 3 times, tears pooling in her eyes. From scandal to speaker, from whispered doubt to honored guest. The image that lingered in public memory, wasn't just the verdict or the dollar figure. It was the contrast. Dylan, slumped alone in the back bench, shrouded in silence, while outside Amelia stood encircled by light, microphones, and support. It was a portrait of power reversed. The man who once wielded a platform to humiliate was now voiceless. The woman once silenced by shame now spoke for thousands. Justice, in this case, was not confined to the four walls of the courtroom. The verdict was only the beginning. Its echo reached into classrooms, living rooms, offices, and newsrooms. The effect was domino-like. Each parent who reconsidered what they believed online. Each teenager who thought twice before sharing a rumor. Each influencer who rephrased a caption to avoid crossing the line. The law had spoken, but so had society. On her first day speaking at another school, Amelia stood before a gymnasium full of students. Flashbulbs popped as local reporters documented the moment. She picked up a piece of chalk from a tray and wrote on the board behind her, "Proof." She turned back to the crowd. "Words matter," she said, voice steady. "Silence doesn't keep you safe. Proof does." The room erupted in applause, not the frenzied applause of spectacle, but the warm, steady applause of acknowledgement. And in that moment, Amelia Carter was no longer just a teacher fighting for her name. She was a witness to a new chapter, where justice could still find its way, even in the noisiest corners of the internet. Weeks after the verdict, Amelia Carter returned to Westbrook Elementary with a steady calm in her steps. The halls that once hummed with whispers now rang with laughter again. Students ran to her, arms full of books and drawings, the shadows of suspicion replaced by the uncomplicated joy of childhood. She unlocked her classroom, inhaling the familiar scent of chalk and floor polish. For a moment, she stood still, letting the quiet embrace her. This was home. Not the courthouse, not the blinding arena of social media, but here, where lessons lived in chalk lines and curious questions. She set down her bag, picked up a stick of white chalk, and wrote a single word on the board, "Proof." It glowed against the black slate, dust floating in the air like tiny stars. The word replaced what had once been erased. Trust reduced to true. Now, it stood whole again, remade, stronger. That evening, the school auditorium filled with parents, teachers, students, and neighbors. Reporters were there too, cameras poised, though Amelia hardly noticed. She was focused on the people in front of her, her community, her circle of truth. Rachel Nguyen stood beside her on stage, calm and resolute as ever. The two women had become symbols now, the teacher who fought for her name, and the lawyer who turned silence into proof. Amelia stepped forward, microphone in hand. She didn't read from notes. She simply spoke from the place where months of pain had finally hardened into wisdom. "Power with no honor," she said, voice echoing across the room, "is just noise. Lead loud, even when you whisper." Applause rippled through the auditorium. Rachel added, "Negligence online isn't an accident. It's injustice waiting to happen. Every post, every share. They're not harmless. They carry weight." The words landed, not like slogans but like truths long overdue. Clips of the speeches spread quickly, but this time, Amelia was not blindsided. This time, she owned the narrative. One video, shared thousands of times, captured her final words on stage. "Silence doesn't keep you safe. Proof does." Side by side with Rachel's closing remark, "Power with no honor is just noise." The lines became mantras. Teens scribbled them in notebooks. Parents quoted them in Facebook posts. Even other teachers began printing them on classroom posters. This time, Amelia's words didn't cut her down. They built her up, and built something larger than her. After the gathering, Amelia walked back into her classroom. Alone again, she sat at her desk. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Tags, reposts, applause. She picked it up, glanced at the screen for a moment, then pressed the power button. The phone went dark. The camera, had there been one filming, would have caught it. The black mirror of the screen reflecting Amelia's face. Her expression was calm, almost smiling. It was silence, but not the silence of fear. It was silence that echoed. Silence that carried. She set the phone aside and picked up her chalk again. On the board, below proof, she wrote the day's lesson plan: ordinary, steady, quietly revolutionary. The trial had ended, but Amelia's story was never about spectacle. It was about what remains after the noise. Justice did not arrive with fireworks or triumphant music. It arrived with chalk dust on a blackboard, with a teacher refusing to disappear, with a community relearning the value of words. The legacy was not just a court verdict. It was a cultural reckoning. Millions saw in Amelia's story a mirror of their own fears, of being misrepresented, mislabeled, mocked online. And they also saw the possibility of fighting back. In the months that followed, Amelia accepted invitations to speak at schools and conferences. She became an advocate for digital responsibility, though she always reminded audiences, "I'm a teacher first." Rachel published articles on the case, using it as precedent in workshops for young lawyers. She often quoted Amelia's line, "Silence doesn't keep you safe. Proof does." For Amelia, the greatest victory was not the money or the media recognition. It was walking into her classroom each morning, hearing her students laugh, and knowing her name once again meant what it always had: guidance, care. The final image is simple: a classroom, a teacher at the blackboard, the word proof written in bold white chalk. On her desk, a silent phone. Screen dark, reflecting her face, not haunted anymore, but free. Justice, it turns out, doesn't always roar. Times it whispers, and when it does, if you listen closely, the whisper can be louder than any lie.